Welcome everyone to the InstructLab Community CLI meeting. Today is August 1st, 2024. We don't really have any specific topics for today. I was just saying we can use this as a place for open discussion, design questions, design inquiries, stuff like that. Whatever people really want to talk about, we can talk about today, because last week we went more in depth into what's been going on in the CLI. There are some major changes still in flight. But overall, the design of everything should be kind of settling down over the next week or two. Yeah, so any topics?
Yeah, I threw one on. Shouldn't be too much. Should be a quick topic, but it's mainly, I don't know if someone's sharing the screen, but it's mainly around, I put a link to the issue.
Charlie, could you share your screen so folks can see?
Me? Okay.
No, Charlie.
Okay. I can't share even.
Yeah, I don't let you have permissions.
Yeah, I just have to find the doc.
Yeah, it's one that I've had some back and forth with BJ. He had some opinions, which thanks for adding inputs to that, BJ.
I'm going, sorry. Too many windows. Should be there now.
Yep, can see it. I started listing them there, so I can start with that top one, which is 1943. And BJ, I added yours in the agenda as well. I'll drop the agenda link for folks. If you want to add anything else, feel free to add it under the issues for discussion section there.
Yeah, so for this one, I just wanted to get some quick input from people, see if there's any issues with what, like, I think BJ and I kind of had us are on a similar page with what we think they should do. But basically, for context, this issue is about adding inline comments to like the config YAML that describe what the fields do, so that people who are editing the config know kind of what they're doing when they're editing fields. Otherwise, they're kind of going in blind a little bit. So I can see the need for it from a UX perspective. And I think the question was more around like, do people have strong opinions on how this should be implemented? Because what I was thinking right now, and what BJ also suggested, I think, was just that we could kind of implement like a template for the config, and then have like the comments already included in that. And then when we're like generating the config, like when someone runs ILAB config in it, they just we populate the fields into that template and then write that out. I think there was some questions around like which like YAML implementation, which libraries actually support like comments. Because I guess I've seen like I think we import PyYAML, but we also import just YAML. And then there's like some kind of implementation of that in a different one. I forget the name. That supports comments. But kind of what we're thinking is, I think I'm going to investigate this a bit more. But what we're kind of leaning towards is having like a template for it, for the config, and then populating whatever values we want into it, and then write that out directly to file. I think that, I don't know if this is necessarily a trivial change, because it might introduce like new, I don't know, I haven't seen exactly how it's implemented today in detail, but it's potential that there might be more changes than I think might be needed in this. But I wanted to just bring this up anyway and see if this is anything people might have issues or opinions on.
Yeah, the challenge with the template is going to be keeping it in sync with the Pydantic class, right? Because that if people add new features to that, right now we just do a YAML dump and it is what it is. But if we have a template that's commented, then of course every time we change the class, we have to fix the template equivalently.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping to look into like what we can do with Python classes as it is, like using doc strings and such. I know that you can use doc strings for functions, but I don't know if you can use them the same way for like class attributes. Ideally, like what I would like for it to do is that you can just add comments to like the class attributes and say, hey, this is what this attribute does. And then like there is a way for us to just extract that into like the config. I don't know if that's possible with Python, but that would be nice if it was. Yeah, Charlie, go ahead.
So I have some work in flight that creating a static config in the one of the persistent storage directories that we introduced. I don't know if it would make sense to have that one have comments just as like if you want to go look at reference, look at this. That is only going to be used by like power users, I would say, because it has a lot of like specific settings for GPU enablement, but it's going to be viewed as like the iLab static upstream config. I don't know. I mean, like the first thing that pops into my head when we talk about commenting a config YAML and getting around all of these complications of like, but what if someone goes and edits it? It might make sense to just have one version of it somewhere that's like the template that we build a lot of things off of. And if you want to go look at what everything does, it's in there. I've been messing around a lot with Pydantic with this work, and there is some cool stuff you can do with like templating things and having like things that run before or after for validation. But it might just be easier to have it live in one place. I don't know. Just my thought.
Yeah, but should that be in like an actual file, or should that be like stored in memory? Because yeah, like you mentioned, if we are also supporting this like global config thing, so then that complicates things a bit more, where it's like two different config files, and if we are adding comments, they should be standardized across both. Like it'd be confusing if it's not consistent between those two files, because someone might have like a global config and whatever in their user space one as well. So if we, then I guess the question is, if that one's going to be a physical file, then like how do we synchronize that against like the user space one that's created? Then maybe I'm thinking if it needs to be consistent across multiple config files, it should just like be a template in the code, and then that way like both of them can be injected. But then I also know that we don't want to write to the global one, most likely.
Yeah, I don't know if it's our responsibility to like maintain comments on a config YAML throughout like user configs, right? So like the way that I've seen it in the past is that there's one somewhere in like user share or something that has like specific information on it. It's like, oh, these are what the fields do. We'll also document it somewhere. But I don't know if the best way to go about this is to have like every config that we create everywhere has comments on it. I think because people are also can pass like a -- config flag for like most operations, and they're not going to comment their own files. So like it might just make sense to have like one somewhere that has comments on it, and we can point and be like, oh, if you want to look at stuff about the config, that one has comments, and there's also documentation. But yeah, I don't know. That's just like the easiest solution in my head. It's like just worry, because the way that we render that, or the way that I guess I'm implementing currently that we render that global file is it's in code. So it's like a YAML in code that we maintain and we can update whenever we want. Render it, dump it into a YAML, and put it on disk. I think it's like local share InstructLab internal config.yaml. We can change that.
But
yeah.
Does that need to be in code? Because that's a one-time operation. Why can't we just ship the file out of the box?
Because you need to keep it in sync with the Pydantic classes, right? As new things get added or changed. But I think your idea about using the comments in there is interesting, right? Because then at least developers changing the file will change the comments, but then you need some way to write this file out based upon what the class says and its comments.
Yeah, so the way that at least we've been thinking of using this internal config, or like the global config, whatever you want to call it, is it's not, I guess we can't like make it so that people can't edit it. They can edit it if they want to, but the way that we're going to view it is it's almost like the template config, that like if you want to use that, because we have that, we have a new environment variable that we look for called iLab global config. And if you set that, the way it works is it reads whatever you set as like the template and then renders a config YAML into the usual spot into like config InstructLab config YAML, using that as like the template instead of the one we have in code. So the way that I've been viewing this hey, let's ship a global config that has like GPU enabled options on it. It would work the same way, where it's not really for editing by users, it's for editing by us. That we're like, this is the thing that we know works for like 4 GPUs or 8 GPUs or whatever, or none. You can use it as a template if you want. So that's why, like in my head, when I'm thinking about, oh, this is already a template config, it makes sense to have it also be the place that we store the templated comments. I don't know. That's just how I've been thinking about it. But that would also mean that you would have to like build your work off of mine, which I don't really want to block you on anything. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, what you're saying makes sense. If we're already borrowing fields from that config, it makes sense to transfer the comments over also. But again, how would we do that? Is there like a Pythonic way to do that? I don't know about Pydantic classes much. I guess I need to look into that. But just like from a high level perspective, is there a way to use like doc strings for class attributes that you know of? Because I know that you can do like a hack where you create like getter setter classes for each attribute and then make those a property, and then you can do like a dot underscore underscore doc or something. But it feels a little roundabout to like create getter setters for each attribute just to get the doc string out of those.
I'm no Pydantic expert, but their docs are pretty thorough. I would assume that there might be something that would maybe fill the need of what we're looking for here. And if not, yeah, the hacky way of either what you said or like render the file and then splice in comments and stuff like that is also possible, or somehow use like a templater to do it. That off the top of my head, I honestly don't really know. But definitely doing it in one place rather than doing it every time we render a config is probably going to make your life a lot easier regardless.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point it makes the most sense to just branch off of whatever your branch is and work on that. I'm fine to try to do that. That way, like I mean, both the global config work and this will kind of go hand in hand. I think that makes the most sense to me. And I can look into the Pydantic stuff. Hopefully, there's an elegant solution for this. I would prefer not to have to come up with some hacky way to do this and then try to revert it later.
Hey, you can always ask InstructLab how to do it. It might know something about Pydantic. You never know.
Okay, got it. Thanks for the inputs.
So the next one looks like it's 1747. BJ, this is yours.
Yeah. So when the change went in to use platform DIRs, which is great, I think, for Linux, the choices that platform DIRs uses for Apple are not beneficial for users of InstructLab. Because primarily everything is under the user's library folder, which is a hidden folder on a Mac, right? So Mac users who want to navigate to it in Finder can't find it because it's hidden. They have to know the secret key combination to expose it in Finder. It's also got spaces in the folder name, which is awkward for using because now I have to quote the paths. And I think that it's not a good choice for us, right? Because I think we're expecting people to manipulate things in the folder, whereas application support is really a place for applications to write their own configs and read their own configs, but the users never really interact with those files. So I do think it's a poor UX experience for Mac users with InstructLab. Is it prior to this, of course, everything was in the current working directory, so that was pretty straightforward. I understand the need to put them somewhere, sort of not just the current user directory, but I think the place chosen by platform DIRs is awkward.
Yeah, no, I agree. I can talk to Oleg about this. I know he has a lot of context about how this persistent storage stuff went in. Off the top of my head, the way that it all works is it's just like custom. It's just a class that I think a lot of it is inferred based off of the the environment. But I'm sure we could just add a couple more things in there. That's like if Mac OS change it to this, it shouldn't be too big of a lift. And I definitely think that having the hidden directory and the spaces is annoying.
Right. I mean, I think the problem now is we just defer to the platform DIRs package, and it does this. And I think that's not very helpful for Mac users. So like for Macs, we might need more custom thing. In fact, I would really like us to respect the XDG vars on Macs, because more sophisticated users use them,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'll assign this to Oleg and to me because I have some context here as well with how the persistent storage stuff works.
Yeah, there should be a easy way to just mock it, where it's like if it's macOS, just like use this directory, like you mentioned. Ensure that this we can override basically what the platform does try to do with the file system, hopefully. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, just a quick thing on that. I thought when we did the review of the design doc, we were veering towards following the XDG format. Are you saying, BJ, it's not following the XDG format?
not on a Mac. For the platform DIRs package, which was what we're using, completely doesn't take into account XDG at all on Mac. In fact, in the GitHub for that package, they've basically asserted they're never going to support XDG for Mac.
Oh, XDG is only supported on Linux. Is that what you're saying?
In the platform DIRs package, that is correct, yes.
Okay.
Is there another package that you know of that does this properly, or is Platform DIRs the only one that has capabilities like this? This is kind of weird that they would be like, nope, we're not going to support Mac. I don't know if that's like a normal thing.
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I'm not familiar with the set of packages. I'm not sure exactly what the options are, rather than crafting our own support for Mac.
So,
Yeah, I mean, we could use Platform DIRs as the starting point, and then just do a quick is Mac OS check and inject some more custom stuff. I think it's pretty straightforward. I think Oleg and I can probably tackle this before 18 hopefully releases, because I don't think we should ship with this sort of support.
So this would be a breaking change, or it wouldn't be, because we just introduced this in the same release anyway. We would just kind of be.
I mean, if we fix it before we ship 18, then it's fine.
Yeah.
But it also works, but it's ugly. At best. That's a very nice way of putting it for Mac OS, because this application space support, that makes me so sad that that's what it uses. So I'll talk to Oleg, and he and I will collaborate on some sort of solution for this. And if anyone else, off the top of their head, knows exactly how this would be implemented, feel free to just go ahead and do it, and assign, or just comment on this issue, and I can assign you. But yeah, I think this is a pretty big one. Yeah, Ihar.
So I think the choice of directories is important, and but I wonder, shouldn't the iLab CLI abstract away the file system for you? We have commands like model list, data list, whatever. I would think that you could operate in the realm of this CLI. So you would list the models, and then you pass not the file name to serve the model, but just the name of the model, and then it would be automatically found in whatever the directory is used. And I would expect something like this for all other commands.
Yeah, so we have an issue for this. I just created this last week, actually. So everything that's -- model or -- model path, the behavior for all of those flags is currently really all over the place. Some of them require absolute paths, some of them require relative paths, some of them require Hugging Face repositories. I think the best solution is being able to, exactly what you just said, and I put this in the issue, is be able to specify, for a model, for example, InstructLab / Granite 7B Lab. That should just read from the cache directory, understand that it's just, finish the path, and get that model. I don't know if that's something that we'll necessarily be able to fix before 18, just because of all the other like blocking things that we have to do. The rule of thumb that I always follow just in this current release is just put the absolute path. It can you know, it can use tilde / whatever. But for models and stuff like that, it's just best for now to use the absolute path. I know in the future we want to definitely patch that up. And I know JD, I think you have some context on this one too.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have a PR open already, which just sort of touches on this a little bit. Not exactly the model path part, but like the part that follows right after. I have a PR which kind of reorganizes how the models that are downloaded are stored. What that PR does is it kind of standardizes the subdirectory format that's created from downloaded models. So it follows like if your URL is InstructLab/GraniteSandWheelApp, then like the directory structure created in your models.cache folder is like InstructLab/GraniteSandWheelApp, or if it's like an OCI one that's like Quay.io something, then like that directory structure is kind of replicated as like a folder subdirectory structure, the URL structure, I mean. So if we are able to merge that and have like a standardized, predictable way of knowing that if this is the URL of the model, then like this is where you can find it. It'll just be cache / that exact URL. So in that case, we can make the model path flag be relative, because we know that we can just take the URL as is and then just append it to like the base root directory, which is the model cache. And then like I think that if we get that change of reorganizing model storage, then I think that'll help the model path flag being like being relative all over the place. And we know that there's a reliable way to find that. I have that PR up. I just know that it can be a breaking change, so I wasn't sure if we want to push it through for GA, but I think it's definitely a required enhancement to like the UX experience, at least around model download stuff.
I think as long as you like make it pretty clear that it merged, like send it in all the proper channels, it's fine. Because the only thing that we have to be careful of right now with everything going on is like announcing stuff like that, because people have a bunch of PRs. They're going to start seeing probably some test failures, and just as long as they know, they can account for it. But yeah, that's definitely something that's good. I mean, the follow up to that is the whole like model path patch sort of thing. The best way to do that, if anyone wants to take it on, is probably we have this thing called the click extended class that basically all options are tied to that class. And it would be pretty easy in there to just say like, hey, if this option is a path, figure out where it actually is. That's like the solution that I would probably go about, rather than patching every instance of model or model path throughout the repository. It can probably be dealt with in one place. So it's not necessarily a huge lift, but kind of similar to what you were saying, JD, all of these things at the moment are like breaking changes to how people have been using InstructLab with all the betas. But it's kind of something we have to choose. Like, do we want these things to be fixed, or are we just too cautious right now? I don't know. It's kind of a decision for everyone to make together rather than one person. So
yeah, and I think that makes sense. The click extension thing is something I can look into. I was planning to look into that model path issue. I think Alina was also interested, so I can work with her on that. But other than what you said about fixing it in one place, the other issue that is involved with that particular problem is that the model path flag itself is not always consistent with what it means. Because sometimes it means you're downloading a model from somewhere versus like you're downloading it to somewhere, versus maybe it's like not a full model, it's an adapter. So like other than just fixing the relative absolute issue, it's also about like whether we should split up that flag into two flags in some places wherever that makes sense. So I think, yeah, what I can do is I can try to get my model directory organization PR into good shape, and then work on this one like right after. I think that would make sense as a follow-up.
Yeah, I think there is, Yuri, there is a need to regularize the flags. I mean, it looks like 8 different teams built different parts of this thing and picked flag names, and they mean different. The same flag name means a different thing here than it means there.
Yeah.
So I think it would be very beneficial to regularize the flags across all the various commands and subcommands.
Yeah. I also know that I think Nathan did an audit of the flags a while ago. We could probably use some of that as well.
I did. It's fairly out of date at this point, but I think it is a reference we could use. Yeah, one thing I concur with BJ. One issue we had is with the sort of splitting up of work is that we've had to sort of reconcile some inconsistencies with the flags. I think probably model and model path and model name, like stuff like that, tends to be the worst of it because there are some places where it's being passed as strings, some places where it's passed as click paths, some places where it's passed as like pathload paths. So I think maybe I don't know if that's something that we're going to be able to reconcile fully for 0.18, but I would happily, help lead an effort to maybe do that as part of 0.19 or even as a Z stream for 18, although that's kind of maybe a major change for a Z stream. But I definitely agree with the sentiment that that's something that needs to happen. I think Eher has his hand up next.
Another thing kind of related to this topic, I think I mentioned it yesterday in some README update, is that so the paths are different on different platforms. We may change it for Mac, but still it will be different. It's not clear how you would script it consistently, regardless of what the platform is. We could have some helper commands on CLI that would spill out the directories used. So you could then pipe it into a variable or whatever, like script in your shell so that it executes commands relative to the output of this command. So you would have like ilab, I don't know, get the value of cache dir, and it would just give you the string of that. So you can now concatenate it with the rest of the file path you need. That could be another helper here.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the way that the persistent storage stuff works is like no matter if you're on Linux or Mac OS. Once we fix the Mac OS part, it like where the models live is a good example. Like that's always pretty constant unless someone changed it, which we don't necessarily support you putting your models in somewhere that we don't know of. The way that I was kind of viewing this going is I think that anything that's a model should be able to be given as either just a straight GGUF, if it's a GGUF, or if it's safe tensors, like the organization or the repo, I forget what the exact term is. So it's like InstructLab / Granite 7B Lab is a good example. Like someone should just be able to give that or a GGUF and all of the flags, because if you're a model name, model path, or model, like those all should work. And the click extended class should just understand that, okay, step one, check the caster, see if the model's there. If the model is there, use that. And then second, if it looks like it could be a Hugging Face path, then download that if we support downloading at the moment. I know that when iLab global config is set, I think we should probably have it so that we don't support downloading because a lot of that is used in downstream product. So there's like a hierarchy of paths to check, which is what needs to be implemented. Because if we just standardize, like you can give us anything that looks like it's a Hugging Face repository, or it looks like it's the end of a caster path, or it's a GGUF, we should just check all of them in the click extended class, and then return whatever looks right, which it shouldn't be super complicated because it's just so much better than currently, because sometimes it just like breaks randomly when it should work.
Yeah, I think I agree. Yeah, I just dropped a comment saying that I think the most intuitive thing I can think of for users is when you're specifying you want to use a model, like what you provide as input should look the same as what you provide to repository. I think then, and like I said, if we're replicating that same kind of structure locally as like exists on wherever you're pulling the model from, I think that will be the most straightforward path to go with for users at least.
Any other topics from anyone?
Yeah, Charlie, this is Kim. Really quick because I have to jump to another call. This is just a heads up for everyone in the community, but whenever this Rel AI GA does go out, I would like to use some part of this meeting to do like a regular triage with all of you, just on all like the CLI project. I know Nathan's already done a first pass of this, kind of closing dupes and closing stale items as well. So just a heads up to you guys, maybe probably not next CLI meeting, but the one after that, we could, I don't know, maybe take like the first 30 minutes of this call, if that's okay with people, to like kind of just triage through the open items on there. Yeah, and clean it up.
Yeah, we used to use this call as a triage
Oh, perfect. Okay.
back in the day.
Okay, cool. So we'll get back
Yeah.
into the habit of that once this whole fiasco goes out the door.
Yeah, I think going back to sort of I don't know, I think we still need to decide sort of if we want to be using the project boards for this, but I think at the very least, like having a milestone, maybe a milestone refinement would make more sense for a community call, but going through the milestone, going through the issues, maybe even seeing if anyone in the community has issues that they want to include or issues they want to work on. Going that milestone route might be a good way to sort of come back into it, and then we can sort of have that project board discussion if that's necessary or if the milestones kind of fit the bill. I think honestly the milestones, just using those will be good, but you know, obviously that could be a conversation to have later.
Yeah, for sure. And then just like if you guys have any issues, PRs that are opened right now that are stale or are dupes, if you find other items that are the same or I don't know, are irrelevant anymore because this new 18.0 release, whenever that does get cut, kind of fixes that. Please go ahead and close that if you get the time. But yeah, that's all for me, and I gotta drop. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's it in general, unless anyone else has another topic they want to put on there. Any takers?
Not a topic, but just kind of dovetailing on what Kim said. We'll try to keep this meeting as upstream focused as possible, right? Because this is the
This meeting is purely for upstream.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to reinforce that.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, the triage is going to be triage of GitHub. So
Yeah, there'll be no nothing product related, whether it's Rel AI or any other downstream productization from another group. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, just a quick question. On the milestone 18 0.18, it says due by August 9th. And sorry if I missed this in the beginning, but is that accurate?
Great question, Joe. It might be accurate. It depends if we make that or not. So I guess this is worth saying. I know I just said like we're not going to talk about product stuff, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. Even though I've just said I'm not going to do that. So for context, I think everybody in this call might be aware, but for the recording, or if not, the sort of right now the sort of Rel AI, which is probably the first downstream product to come out of the InstructLab upstream project. We are all the Red Hat engineers working upstream on InstructLab. We're targeting for 0.18 to be the basically the same the version upstream of InstructLab that will be bundled as part of the Rel AI 1.1 product. So the coupling of those two things is pretty tight, a little tighter than I would honestly prefer, but you know, it's just sort of how things have shaken out. So there are a few items within the upstream project that we're still working on and that are sort of blockers. So one thing that folks might have seen is there's like this blocker label now. That label will not be persistent. That label will be going away because it's too producty, and it's something that after 18 goes out, we're going to be getting rid of that label. So the August 9th date is a long-winded way of me saying like the August 9th date, so long as we're able to get in the things that we need for the Rel AI product, by then we will do the upstream release. In the future, and this is something I feel pretty strongly about, we're not going to have these things be so coupled together. I think what we would like to do is something that's more typically seen in upstream projects that have downstream products, which is where you're doing more frequent upstream releases. and products are sort of taking from those upstream releases rather than having them tied as a one-to-one nature. That's kind of the unfortunate situation we're in this time, just because of how things shook out. But you know, that tying of things won't be as tight together in the future. But yeah, so in this case, the date might slip depending on Rel AI, but in the future, the dates that we're having for these milestones should be a lot stricter. And we were kind of in a good cadence with that, with like 0 to 15, 16, even 17. 18's been a bit of a special case, but yeah, that's kind of a very long-winded way of answering your question, Joe. Does that make sense, or if I've just been rambling?
Yeah, it makes sense. I get where we are right now. So thanks.
Yeah, I just want to add that that being said, we are making pretty consistent progress towards the stuff we had in 18, because you might have noticed that we are doing like daily pre-releases pretty much. And a lot of the stuff that was in the 18 milestone has already been resolved and released as part of one of these pre-releases. So it's more just that we are kind of 0 or 18 release itself has been a bit of a moving goalpost, but a lot of the things that were in the milestones have already been completed. So it's just a couple of the kind of leftover things that are still in that milestone. So just to let everybody know that we aren't like ignoring that milestone. We're kind of working towards it a bit more slowly than usual, I guess.
Yeah, very good context. Yeah.
The second that we get something that works top to bottom, I think we're probably going to cut the release. We've been doing like weekly, like end to end, like someone sits down and just runs everything from start to finish. We had one of those last week, went pretty well. A couple of bugs. You probably saw like the 18 milestone like grew a little bit on like Monday or Tuesday, or we caught a lot of bugs from that. And we've been like slowly chipping away at them throughout the week. We have another one tomorrow that we're gonna do, and hopefully it goes better. We don't see too many blockers, so like we're really just going until the thing works 100% is what I would say, which we're pretty close. JD had a good point. Like that we are making very consistent progress.
Great.
Yeah, and just one other thing I want to add to that, and this is a conversation I think we'll have to have on the community side. There's also, you know, the difference between 0.17.1 and 0.18 could be pretty massive. It'll be more incremental in the sort of subsequent versions. I think, and this is a purely community conversation. This has no prioritization implications, but at some point, I think we're going to want to have a conversation, probably in this forum, I would assume, as well as upstream Slack and on mailing lists, as to when we want to cut a 1.0 of InstructLab. We're sort of still in the pre-1.0 era, which is where we're sort of, you know, changing things. You know, we've had some functional regressions. You know, we've had some growing pains going from sort of the more researchy origins of the product into sort of more of the into sort of more of the you know, actual project. But I think in these future minor versions, at least the idea I have is sort of refining what's there, tightening up, addressing things like a lot of things that BJ's mentioned in the call, like making sure we have good support across operating systems, making sure that we have consistent flags. I think once we sort of get a lot of those items sort of dealt with and standardized and reconciled with things like our dev docs and things like our community documentation, I think in a world where we get all that, I think we can sort of really seriously talk about doing a 1.0. And from there, I think, you know, the project governance will probably shift in such a way where, you know, we go from sort of, we do Y streams as well as Z streams if there's a critical fix, to sort of more of a formalized, planned out version of sort of what we do now. So that's a conversation I think in the coming months we're going to want to have, and we may even do a special edition community CLI meeting for something like that. I'll have to talk to our OSPO folks, but yeah, that's something I definitely want to do at some point.
Sounds good. Cool. Thank you.
I think there's no more topics that we can call it. I'm going to stop the recording unless someone else wants to throw something in there at the last second. Cool. All right.